everybody. Like Caitlin said, this is our first Pride panel here at Codesmith, and I am so enthusiastically happy to be here and very, very proud to be here as a member of the LGBTQIA2S+ community. Anywhere where you might find yourself on that spectrum, or whether you don't find yourself on that spectrum, it's cool. You're welcome here. We're all just people being people, right? So I'm so excited to be here and to talk about some of the realities of LGBTQ advocacy in and for tech. We have 4 spectacular Codesmith alums here, so I'm so excited that we're going to get to know Andrew, Julia, Kaylee, and Wirapa, or May, better over the next 45 minutes. Like Caitlin said, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. After we get through some predetermined questions, then we're happy to work with anything. So if you have questions, be sure to ask. So before we go into the actual question portion, I just want to get a better idea of our incredibly sparkly panelists. So we're going to go through one by one and have them answer their name, their pronouns, where they're tuning in from, their current company and role, a little bit about what they do in that company and what that kind of means for them on the day-to-day. And lastly, we all want to know what they were doing before Codesmith, because as we know, we're a diverse crew that end up at this crazy immersive. So let's do this alphabetically by first name. So we're going to start with Andrew. Andrew, take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I'm Andrew. I'm in Brooklyn, New York right now. I use he, him pronouns. Right now, I'm a full stack engineer at Ash Wellness, which is sort of like a customizable platform which aims to make healthcare more accessible and inclusive by enabling providers and businesses to easily turn on and scale at-home diagnostics to their patients and to their community. So what that means for me is, like, on a high level, I'm working to support all of our backend client integrations. We're maintaining a public-facing full-stack app, and I'm also helping to sort of build, maintain, and scale we have like a fleet of microservices that supports all of that stuff too. So that's what I do on kind of the daily with Ash. And prior to Ash and my time at Codesmith, I was a professional classical flutist, freelancing in New York City, and I did that for about 18 years. So I will pass off the torch to whoever is next.
Awesome, Andrew. Yay, classical music. Gotta love it. I'm going to kick it over to Julia.
What's up, everyone? I'm Julia. I use she, her. Let's see, I'm coming out of Oregon. It's like right on the border of Idaho and Oregon, a little town called Joseph. So I work remotely from my hobby farm here. I currently work at a company called Rainmaker Games. I'm their lead front-end engineer. And let's see, what do I do in my current role? Just a bunch of front-end stuff. Architecture. Right now we're launching the NFT marketplace, so that's been really fun. And before Codesmith, I was an acupuncturist. So that's
awesome
it.
Awesome stuff, Julia. Kicking it down to Kaylee.
Hey everyone, I'm so glad to be here today as well. My name's Kaylee. I'm currently located in New York City, also in Brooklyn, south of Prospect Park. And I currently work for Twitch. So if you haven't heard of Twitch, we are a really big live streaming site, particularly for gamers, but we also have like a lot of different folks on our site kind of live streaming a lot of different content. So I recommend you check it out if you've never heard of us. I've been here at Twitch, I think almost 11 months now, so almost a year. And I'm a software engineer. I would say I primarily deal with the front end, especially with accessibility. And then I also have started to dip into our back end in Golang. My pronouns are she, her, hers. What was I doing before my current role? I was actually a engineering recruiter. So I was the person that did a lot of phone screens and helped recruit people to startups. I was also an operatic soprano, continuing the classical music gang. And yeah, that was also what I was doing before I came to Codesmith as well. So I'm going to pass it off to May.
Beautiful stuff. May.
Hey everyone, I'm really happy to be here. My name is Wirapa, or I go by May, and I'm a recent Codesmith graduate from LA cohort 48, and my pronunciation is she, her, and I'm based in Seattle. And prior to Codesmith, I used to be a QA engineer and also a piano teacher.
Look at all the musicians in the room. Unsurprising, you know, a lot of engineering brains are, of course, attracted to the system that is music, of course, attracted to software systems as well. Y'all, we're so happy to have you. For anyone who is just joining, we just went through and introduced our 4 panelists. Welcome to our first Codesmith Pride panel today. We're about to get into some questions that we've pre-prepared. And then if you have any questions that you'd like answered, feel free to drop them in the chat and we will get them to our panelists after we've gone through all of the questions. So let's start out. First, Andrew, I got one for you, my friend, and then we'll hear from some other folks as well. Andrew, does your company foster a safe space and celebrate their LGBTQ plus employees? And do they offer resources for these employees that are easily accessible and well known?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll have to start answering that by saying that I feel that my company is a bit of a unicorn in this space, in that I work for a primarily queer startup. So it's queer founded. Many of us that work there identify as queer. So yes, it is definitely a safe and inclusive place to work. You know, so it's a bit of a different experience for me, like, you know, reading through some of these questions that just were sort of no-brainers for me at this job. You know, it's a very welcoming environment. It's a very inclusive environment. The sort of the whole ethos of the company is to make healthcare more accessible and inclusive. And I think that inclusive thing is just like baked into the company, and it translates into every aspect, into hiring, into, you know, the way that we work as a team. So it's a really great and supportive place. So yes, the answer to that is yes.
Beautiful. We love it, right? As we know, the queer community does face so many medical issues that might not be the same in other communities. So I'm so happy to hear that you have found this awesome place. And yes, that it is, of course, forefront. Kaylee, how about you?
Yeah, so at Twitch, we actually have we call them guilds, but you might hear the word like employee resource groups at other companies, or some kind of employee community group. So we have a guild called Rainbow Road that is specifically for LGBTQ plus employees. We have our own Slack channel, and we've all been collaborating this month to celebrate Pride Month together with a lot of various events for our employees internally. And then also, I'm less educated on what exactly we're doing for the streamers who are on our website, but I know that we also have even organized events for like queer streamers and have been highlighting queer content creators on Twitch as well. So I definitely feel welcomed, and I've met a lot of other LGBT people on my team, off my team, just within the community at large, and that's been really great.
Awesome stuff. I love the name Rainbow Road. Shout out Nintendo. Julia or May, anything to add?
Yeah, honestly, I work at, well, the last 2 companies I've worked at have been crypto startups, and I've been the only queer person and the only woman. So to be honest, I don't think inclusivity in like LGBTQ events or anything like that has been prioritized at all. But to kind of answer your last question, like, I do feel like it's a safe space. At my current company, I've had 2 check-ins with my CTO in the past month, where he's just been like, just acknowledge that I'm pretty much the only tech minority in the room, you know, and asking me how that's going for me, how they can be more supportive, and letting me know that hiring a more diverse candidate pool is his intention. So I do feel like it's a safe space.
That's spectacular. I'm so glad that communication is happening, that conversation has even started, because as we all know, it's not necessarily the case, whether we're talking tech or any other place. So yeah. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Okay. Then how about one for May? May, and anyone else who's interested in answering, how has being part of the LGBTQ plus community made an impact on the work that you do? This could be either encouraging companies that you work with, or thinking through software projects, approaches that are more inclusive.
The software project that I used to work with. So is impact in my work is like we care more about the inclusive and care more about diversity. So like we kind of try to have to think about like acknowledge that our user is different and we have to be aware of that. A solution that we try to like came up with and then make our software to like be for everyone.
Love it. Anyone else have something to add?
I might say a little bit about, you know, the sort of the origin story of where I work is, you know, one of our co-founders was sort of frustrated with an experience of finding inclusive healthcare and wanted to make that easier for members of his own community. So I think we all have the mindset that we are, you know, doing this as a primarily community-driven mission, I guess. So it informs everything we do, and a lot of what we do is prep testing and STI testing. We do all kinds of other things too, but that's like our biggest thrust, I think, at the moment. And it's nice to feel like we are actually helping, you know, the community to which we belong. Many of us belong.
That's awesome. I love that. There's so many of us that got into software to make a difference, and it's awesome to hear you actually making a difference, Andrew. So beautiful stuff. Let's keep it rolling. Julia, I loved what you were talking about with the conversations you were having with your CTO. What experiences or tips do you have for fostering inclusivity in your workplace? So this can be things that you've seen been implemented well or not so well. How have you yourself been fostered? I know you've kind of touched on it already, but the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'd say like definitely that communication, that feels like super important to me and super supportive, even though there's not a lot of people like me in the meetings, you know. But let's see. So, okay, so I've been through a lot of interviews, and the interview I had with the company I'm currently at, they actually like made a point to be like, just so you know, we're really only men. We're only white men. Like, how does that make you feel? Like, and it was like, they really like came out and asked me like, are you gonna be okay with that? We talked about it. It was acknowledged. And I'd never been in an interview where it was even brought up. And so like, I also think just interview processes in general. One thing my CTO wanted to make a point of is having me, so like 2 weeks into this job, I just started about probably a month and a half ago. He wanted me to take on more interviews. So 2 weeks in, I've been interviewing people, and I find that it's really insightful, because sometimes like people won't look you in the eye, or like I'd say like 2 weeks ago, I had a technical interview I was giving, and he was going for a staff position. And so I sign on, and the first thing he said, he was like, whoa, is this an HR interview? And I was like, no, this is a technical interview. I'm the lead front-end engineer. And we kind of proceeded, but like, I was able to give that feedback to my CTO, and he really took it to heart. And honestly, that it can filter a lot of people. And it's just, it makes I don't know, I think even in an initial interview process, it can weed out a lot of the toxicity in company culture. So yeah, just communication, and yeah, just having that space where you feel supported and you know it's an intention of the company to kind of foster that inclusivity.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Yikes. Awesome. Speaking of interviews, we're going a little off script, Caitlin, but does anyone have any, from the other side of the interview table, any experiences in the interview process similar to Julia's, where you think that your queerness came up and either helped or hindered?
I don't know if it necessarily helped or hindered. I think it maybe helped me get this current job. But I would also say, I sort of, to Julia's point, and you can get a lot from an interview, and that helps to sort of filter things out. I know that I make it a point when I'm on the other side of interviews, talking to prospective engineers or whoever we're interviewing, to stress that we are like such an inclusive workplace. And I think the reaction to that has been very illuminating. And, you know, we're able to then pass that on to our hiring managers and just take notice of things like that.
I'm also in the same boat as Andrew. I don't know if it's ever really helped or hindered me. I will out myself in pretty much every single interview because I actually want to see how they respond. I think because particularly as like a femme woman of color, I'm not going to be read as like queer. And that I think speaks to a lot of maybe the issues we have within our own community with inclusivity toward people of color. But I know that I'm going to be read first as a minority or a woman of color rather than as a queer person. So I usually talk about like, usually I couch it within a question like, you know, I'm a queer woman of color and I really value like mentoring other women of color in engineering or mentoring other queer people or something like that. Like, how does your company handle diversity? So I'll like just put it out there and just like see what they say and see what the vibe is. Cause I'm lucky to live in an area in New York City where I don't feel unsafe or anything like that being out. So I actually like kind of do it to see, you know, what kind of vibes do I get back?
So I agree. I totally agree with Kelly that like before like, and I want to add like before you doing the interview, like research the company on their culture and their value, and like when you ask the question, like just ask that upfront like about their mentorship.
I love it. It is remarkable how much culture will seep out very, very quickly, as long as you know what to look for and what to listen for, because those dog whistles are always a blow-in. This one is near and dear to my heart as someone who can barely hide their queerness. We'll start with you, Kaylee. Have you ever felt that you've needed to adjust your online presence or voice or code switch in any way to fit into like the stereotypical culture in tech? And how do you kind of balance trying to fit in with an existing culture with bringing all the incredible diversity that you bring?
I would say that for me, I do experience some element of code switching, although as I mentioned, because I think my queerness is maybe less visible among my many identities, it often becomes more of like a gendered or racialized experience code switching than it does being a queered experience. So for me, it's often like, am I too assertive in meetings? Am I not assertive enough in meetings? You know, am I, you know, X or Y? You're often, I think, torn between these two poles of expression, particularly when you're like a woman in technology, maybe like debating or discussing or like asserting a technical position to maybe like a majority male team, which is the one that I'm on. I'm very thankful that my team is extremely inclusive and I feel like really solid there, but I have been on teams, maybe in other positions where I did feel that I had to be more like neutral or more, just sort of more like less authentic to myself in a certain way or less expressive to myself, or maybe talk less about like just things about myself that would be like different from the norm within that company culture that I maybe had to feel more quiet about. So it can kind of go both ways. I would say like never, you know, endanger yourself or put yourself in a position where you feel unsafe. But if you do feel like you're supported in your company culture, it can be really wonderful to feel like you can like express your most authentic self.
Amen. Amen. Julia.
Yeah, honestly, Kaylee, you like hit it exactly how I feel. Like this is something I still work on like daily. It's like, you know, when you do show up to a meeting, there's like 20 other engineers and you really are like one of the only minorities. It feels, it can be probably so easy just to like stay quiet, not voice your opinions, like stay small, not like take up space. So I think there's just a balance between feeling safe and feeling empowered and vocalizing what you want to vocalize if you feel supported. But yeah, I definitely experienced some level of code switching, and I think I've also gotten better with more experience and more confidence and more practice, just speaking up and just kind of taking up that space, but definitely something I'm working on for sure. And I also think it's also like if I do it, I feel like maybe others around me can do it more. So it's like almost like the more we, you know, we self-empower and strengthen ourselves and our own voice, like the easier maybe it is for other people, maybe in a similar position, do the same. So if you feel safe and supported, of course.
And then always that unfortunate caveat that we always have to remind each other of. As long as we feel safe, remember it's if you're safe. I love it. Love it. Andrew, May, anything to add?
I think it's maybe a little different for me in this one. I definitely don't feel like I have to code switch at work at all. You know, like being surrounded by queer people makes it a lot easier to be your authentic self at work. But I would say, I think sort of to what Kaylee was saying before, you know, about making it almost a point to out yourself. I remember I was very conscious of doing that when I was interviewing, because to me, it wasn't worth it at all for me to end up in a place where I would be uncomfortable or feel weird about myself. You know, so if in that interview process, they weren't interested in me because of my queerness, then like, I was super not interested in moving forward with them at all. So I think it worked a little bit both ways in that aspect for me.
Awesome. May?
Yeah, so yeah, I think for my experience, especially in the immersive program, I think I just like be myself and don't have to. I think I was a bit lucky that the people in my cohort and like the immersive program is very supportive, and they like really open mind, so I can like be myself and don't have to like change the appearance or like a voice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such an interesting concern for all of us, but I do love Kaylee's point that, and Andrew's point as well, that if, you know, if this is a problem, it's also going to be a problem for me. So maybe I should just talk about it up front. Because as we all know, we hit that point where it's, do I come out or not? Is this the time for me to do it or not? Am I safe? Is it worth it? And thanks y'all for the bravery and reminding us the actual values and why we do these things. So speaking of coming out, it can be very, very nerve-wracking, especially in a professional workspace. And so we originally wrote this as if you're out in your personal sphere, but it sounds like pretty much, I'm sorry, in your professional sphere, it sounds like everyone pretty much is. Do you have any tips on navigating that process? It doesn't have to be at your current company specific, you know, how would I navigate it in a currently queer company, but just in your professional network at large, just any tips on how to navigate that?
Let's see, any tips? You know, I would just say there's such a balance between like courage and also just comfort, like just like finding what feels comfortable, and finding the community where you do feel like you want to be vulnerable. I've never outed myself in an interview process. Honestly, I've never even thought to do it. So it's really cool to hear Andrew and Kaylee's experience with that. I've found people in my community or my workplace that I feel really comfortable with, and then I can kind of enter into that conversation. But I think everyone's comfort level and courage level is just different, you know? So it's really like a person by person basis and situation by situation, just instinctual maybe.
I would say for me, it was really important to seek out a community, and maybe for me, at least, I'm not speaking for everyone here, to be maybe at a larger company that would have those things like ERGs and like larger community-based organizations within. I think sometimes it can be hard when you're at, as Julia mentioned, I think you're at like a smaller company. So some companies like that are like maybe 20, 30 people, you might be the only out queer person or the only person of color or something like that. That can be, ERG means employee resource group, sorry. That would be something like, you know, an LGBT org within your company. Like, as I mentioned, Rainbow Road is an ERG at Twitch. So I would say that, like, thinking about if you really want to have a community, because I remember being at a really small company and there were only 2 out people, me and another colleague. And one time they were talking to me about some sort of LGBT issue. And I said, oh, well, I'm bisexual as well. And they said, oh, I had no idea. So like, that can also be like something you might encounter where you have these experiences where you maybe feel or don't feel part of the community, but being at a larger company, I think, can sort of allay that, because there are more individuals that you might vibe with and more people to like form a community with than when you're at like a 20-person company and maybe there's not a lot of folks there.
Unless all the folk are queer. obviously, right?
I know, I feel like I have nothing to add to this conversation.
You absolutely do. You're the definition of a unicorn. It's spectacular. So talking about what we do once we've actually gotten there, in the interview phase itself, I know Kaylee is pretty upfront with it. Love that Andrew is as well. It can be hard to get a clear sense of people's culture. A company's culture. I'm reminded of a time when I was told, diversity is top of mind here at XYZ company. And I asked them, okay, so what's the makeup of the team? And all they would say is diversity is top of mind. And so what sort of tips do you have for navigating that, getting an idea whether the company is welcoming to LGBTQ plus individuals, and also that it'll actually support your growth?
So I'm a former engineering recruiter. So I've been on sort of both sides of this conversation, where I've been on phone calls and screening calls with engineers who are queer and have asked me about diversity at my company. And I've also been on the other side, where after I graduated from Codesmith during Codesmith, I was interviewing and I was like asking people about diversity as well. So I feel I have maybe kind of some level of perspective about talking to your recruiter. So for me as a former recruiter, and as when I was recruiting, I felt like this question was really important, and I actually felt like a genuine desire to answer it as truthfully as possible while still, selling the company, which was really my job during those phone calls. So if I'm on the other side of the phone and I was getting questions like, how does your company support diversity? Do you have resources for LGBT employees? Things like that. That would never offend me. I think it's obviously a red flag if your recruiter gets really dodgy or tries to dodge the question. I think that's probably a red flag. So most recruiters, I think, would have something prepared for this question. And so when I was interviewing, I not only asked the recruiter that, I also got kind of more specific, what percentage of employees are do you keep any kind of records of how many, what percentage of your engineering team is women, for example? So I might ask kind of more probing questions like that. And when I got to the technical interviews with other engineers, I would always ask company culture, just a general question to sort of softball it in. And then I'd be like, that's so wonderful to hear about the culture. I'd love to hear about inclusivity. Or I'd love to hear about if you know of any resources for LGBT engineers here at this company. So I would just kind of keep probing as much as you feel comfortable. You don't have to out yourself in this conversation or anything like that, although that's what I often did to kind of, as I mentioned, gauge the vibe. But as a recruiter, that's something that never would have offended me. I actually would talk about my experiences as a queer person at the company when I was a recruiter to queer candidates to make them feel more comfortable. I've never seen that done on my end, but maybe you'll encounter a recruiter like that down the line. Another thing you could potentially do is after you get the offer, maybe reach out to former employees of the company on LinkedIn and just say hey, I have this offer. I'd love to hear more about the company culture and see if anyone responds to you. I mean, the worst case is they don't. Maybe try to back channel. If you have any, there's lesbians in tech, that's one of the tech groups I know about. If you're in a group for LGBT people in tech, see if anyone knows anything about the company, or even here in the Codesmith alumni group, see if anyone's heard anything or maybe heard from a friend of a friend, that kind of thing. I think those are also valuable. And also even reading Glassdoor, which you kind of have to take with a grain of salt because anyone can write a review. But if there's a lot of one-star reviews and a lot of people are pointing out a lack of inclusivity at the company, that can be a pattern. So that's kind of my spiel.
Cool, I love it. Thanks for that actually very practical advice. Andrew.
Yeah, I would piggyback onto that just a little bit and say that when I was interviewing, I applied not exclusively, but I would say a majority of the places that I applied to, I found through Out in Tech, which I assume is quite similar to lesbians in tech. And that made me feel a lot more comfortable if people that worked at these companies who were in this sort of resource group were saying, come join my company, it's a great place to work. It made me feel a lot more comfortable applying there, knowing that it at least couldn't be terrible. That was my gauge for that. And then also, I have some other friends in the industry too, and asking around, do you know anybody who works here? Can I talk to them? And the Codesmith network is pretty extensive at this point too. And so I think there's a lot of ways that you can do some research that way, I think. But Out in Tech for me was huge.
Awesome. Julia, anything to add?
Yeah, I think they pretty much covered it. I mean, I'd say for big tech companies, it is probably fairly easy to go online and aggregate some data and just take a look at what's out there. And if it feels like a company culture that you might want to be a part of. And for startups, I mean, you really got to ask not like, do you prioritize inclusivity, but how? Like, how do you prioritize it? And how are you prioritizing a more diverse candidate pool? I think those two questions like can illuminate a lot.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. So y'all, as we know, we are frequently referring to ourselves as one big family, and a lot of times our family of choice as a queer community is just that, a family of choice based on a lot of mentorship and resources and safe spaces that we kind of are lucky enough to find along the way. So we're going to move on to the concept of like mentorship in tech, especially for queer folks. So having mentors and sponsors and a strong network of LGBTQ plus colleagues who truly support you can make such a difference in life. And this isn't just for tech, this is literally anything, because it can be scary out there for us we queers, right? So let's talk about some of the resources out there that have helped you kind of find your footing and continue to grow. Julia, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, one resource for me was the Codesmith mentorship program. Kaylee was my mentee in the program. She's my girl, and we've stayed in touch, and that's been amazing. You know, just having her just to vent or talk shit to, you know, when I need to. But I would also just say, like, there's, you know, whether it's in your workplace, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, like if you reach out and you have a connection with someone in the LGBT community, foster that, even if it's small in the beginning, like it can definitely be something if you work at it and if it's meaningful to you. So I'd say just like finding that community and those mentorship opportunities, yeah, and just staying open. But Kaylee's my girl, so I would definitely say Codesmith mentorship program.
Some stuff. And it sounds like Julia, Jamie is your grand mentee right here in this room. So keeping it in the fam. Awesome, awesome. Kaylee, how about you?
Yeah, I'm just gonna echo Julia's point. Julia is my crypto queen. She supported me through like all my time at Codesmith. Even after she graduated before me, she was still supporting me even though I was in my senior phase and she had already gone to her job. So that was like really amazing to have her to talk about. And even though we really honestly didn't at the time of Codesmith, I don't think really talk a lot about like LGBT specific topics, frankly. We mostly just talked about the program or like what struggles I was having. It was just nice to know that like, it's just like a safe environment. Like, you know, you're not going to be judged, you know, like you don't have to be weird or like, you know, hide any aspects of your personal life or anything. It was just like nice to really be open. And just to talk to her about stuff like that. And we're also job twins. I think we started our jobs on the same day. So, so we twinned. So that was great. And yeah, as Jamie pointed out in the chat, she is my mentee currently. And that's been also amazing to pass along the torch and, you know, hopefully not screw it up for the next generation.
Cool. Let's keep rolling. For everyone, just because it is Pride Month and, you know, you just want to keep the conversation going. Who is your LGBTQ role model that has inspired you in the tech space? This could also be in your personal network. It could also be, you know, Beyonce. We don't care. We're just curious who your role model is and why. Let's start with May.
Oh, I would say my role model is in my personal network. So I would say my partner is my LGBT role model in tech because she also like inspired me to like look into tech space as well. And I as I see, it's like every team when she worked with, she also she always like create a welcoming and inclusivity and supportive vibes with her, and like it's really important especially like to the value to me that like everyone can be them should be themselves, and especially during in the workplace to like bring the best out of them and like win as a team. And I really admire that a lot with her.
Oh my God, my cold heart grew 2 sizes that day. Oh man, I love it. Okay. How about you, Julia?
Okay, I don't have a role model in tech in the LGBTQ space, but my role model in tech, okay, it's Dorothy Vaughan. I don't know if anyone's seen Hidden Figures, but she's such a badass. So she worked for NASA, and yeah, it's so good, in the late 40s, and she was a mathematician and a human computer. And she was the first African-American woman to supervise a staff at the center. And she like paved the way for machine computers, and she taught herself and her entire staff Fortran, the coding language. So shout out to Dorothy Vaughan.
Shout out Dorothy Vaughan. Shout out badass women. Shout out badass Black women everywhere. Awesome. What a great role model, and talk about a spectacular human being. How about you, Andrew?
I think I would say that my role model in tech is probably my best friend from the Codesmith program, Mikey Gower, who I turn to for almost like every question I have, both in my technological life and in my personal life. He's just been a huge support for me getting through the program, getting hired, keeping my job, all of those things.
Awesome, I love it. I love the connections that actually happen here. And if Andrew is anything like everyone else who comes to the program, I'm sure he assumed, yeah, sure, I'll make some friends, but nothing like what we actually make here, because it's such great friends that we do make here. Kaylee, how about you?
I would say my LGBT tech role model is Alan Turing. He was a British computer scientist who is by some considered to be the father of theoretical computer science and also artificial intelligence, and is really well known for his Turing machine. And also he worked on during World War II, sort of like a code breaking German secret codes. Unfortunately, he was persecuted by the British government for being gay, and he died by suicide. So they, I think, only recently like apologized to him for like doing that. So it's really a story of like a genius who overcame a lot, unfortunately died in really unfortunate circumstances, but is someone whose shoulders I think we stand on as part of the LGBT community.
Yeah, talk about a devastating, devastating story. Also the same story as Johannes Brahms. I'm sorry, Tchaikovsky. Sorry, I was not thinking about Brahms. Tchaikovsky, also equally awful. Cool. Okay, so that is the end of our pre-prescribed portion. Let's start with some chat, some questions from the chat. So we'll start. Our first question from David says, when you're doing advocacy, now I assume this can be either within tech, within your current position, or just life in general, have you felt you're more successful in making change by being diplomatic, or by being loud and open about your values and beliefs? Let's start with Julia. What do you think, Julia?
That's a really interesting question, because I think everyone is like empowered in different ways. Like for me, I don't find a lot of confidence like when I'm really like loud or like strong about my beliefs. I find like I'm a little bit more confident and feel like in my body and in my power when I am a bit more diplomatic. But there are some voices out there that I'm just like, damn, thank God, like they are speaking loud and like they're out and they're strong. So I would say whatever makes you feel most empowered. Like, I think that's a really good indicator of like, yeah, just what you should move forward doing, for sure. A good healthy mix exists, I think.
Absolutely. May, what do you think?
Yeah, so yeah, I would say like so people is different, right? So like try to do something that you feel really comfortable with when you have like like when you try to empower yourself, like trying to find the right fit for yourself. Like for example, for me, I didn't comfortable to being loud, but for me it's like talk with other people with the sincerity and trying to like have some create some connection with them.
Kaylee, how about you?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty complex question for me because I think it actually really more depends less on like how I feel in the moment and rather more when analyzing the situation, like what levers are there for you to pull and what ways can you exert your influence. So that's what I always look at, particularly as someone who used to be in recruiting. I would have to deal with these incredibly strong-willed and very high up in the company engineering managers and engineering executives. And I would basically have to go up to them and tell them their team was not diverse enough. And like, you know, how are we going to fix that? And some of them would respond well to like argumentation about, you know, it's the right thing to do. We can't have a non-diverse engineering team. That's going to reflect poorly on us on the company. Some of them, you know, you'd have to kind of push more. I might have to make the monetary argument. For example, Harvard Business Review has mentioned that less diverse teams perform worse in terms of like monetary value to a company. So it really depends. I would say I would stay assertive within the bounds of like what's appropriate for my role. And as an engineer, I'm still like always advocating for LGBT, women of color, et cetera. But it really is like conversation specific, person specific. How well do I know this person? You know, what kind of strategies do I think are going to be persuasive to them? And obviously I would approach the C-suite much differently than I would maybe approach a coworker. So it kind of boils down to a lot of factors. But I would say that I always try to be like reasonably assertive.
I like that. Reasonably assertive. Andrew?
Yeah, I think you just sort of have to feel out in the moment which of those two things is going to get you the outcome that you want in the situation that you find yourself.
Love it. Y'all, our next question, how do you handle imposter syndrome as a queer individual at your company? And do you think your queerness impacts your imposter syndrome? Let's start with Kaylee.
I think imposter syndrome for me has been an ongoing struggle. It really comes and goes in waves. So that's like something that maybe is kind of frustrating for me because I'll feel like I'll have this period where I feel really great. I feel really confident in what I'm doing. And then I'll just like hit a block and I'll start to feel like, oh my God, I can't do anything. I am so dumb. Why do I not know this already? Just these feelings of like extreme self-criticism, which is partially imposter syndrome and maybe partially just, you know, maybe the type of person I am. I think some of us are maybe more self-critical than others. For me, in terms of whether my queerness impacts it, I would say not really, in the sense that I feel more impacted as like a woman because of the like gender stereotypes that exist in technology. So that for me is a more present identity for me. And then also because of the positive racism stereotypes about Asian people that exist in the tech field as well. Like Asian people being supposedly very like good at certain things sometimes makes it stressful for me when I'm like, I can't do second grade math, please help. So I think those identities sort of overrule my queer identity, but I have found a lot of solace in speaking to other queer people like Julia or like someone on my team who is also queer and just talking through the situation, even though it's not really explicitly a queer moment or like a queer experience. So that's something that I love hearing a pro engineer say, I can't do second grade math, please help. You know, we can all do this. Yes, it's true. Yeah, so it's really kind of a case-by-case moment. For me, I tend to lean on the support of others to get through imposter syndrome, to remind myself of everything that I've achieved in the previous time and like what I've been doing before and how far I've come. And to always try to keep that growth mindset of like, I'm learning, that kind of thing. And, you know, if things ever get really bad, I think it's always good if you have a trusting relationship with your managers just to bring it up and being like, I'm really discouraged about this project or task I'm on. Like, how can we break it up or get me more support from a senior engineer here to like help me through this like rough spot?
Cool, I love it. Andrew.
I'm not sure that my queerness affects my imposter syndrome necessarily. I think my imposter syndrome sort of exists outside of outside of all of my various identities. But I would say that I have relied on my queerness to help me get through my imposter syndrome by relying on my network of people, the people that I met in Codesmith. My lead engineer is a queer person, and you know, so I have a lot of avenues that I can turn to when things start to get overwhelming, and that I think has been really helpful for me.
I love it. I love it. See above, Re family. May, how about you?
Yeah, so for me, I like definitely have an imposter syndrome, and not only like the LGBT appearance is all about like minority and immigration as well, and like the way that I try to like deal with it is you need to like acknowledge it that you have it, and if you comes and go if you not go away, but is if you not like last in the like when it come, it's not gonna last that long as well. So I try to like lean on other people for support, like try to find someone to talk that you feel like comfortable with.
Great, I love it. Julia?
Yeah, I love what May said. It's just like it really does come and go. It's temporary. That's always helpful. And in terms of like my queerness, like impacting imposter syndrome, it's hard to know like how much of a variable I guess that is. It's kind of like hard to parse out. But yeah, I think imposter syndrome, like for me, it comes from this root of like feeling like I'm like not good enough, like I'm not there. And so maybe as a queer woman, like I do feel the need to prove myself, since I am different from my team. So it definitely could impact it, and I'm not really sure in what ways. But in terms also of like what helps it, I don't know if this might be a little I'm not sure if this is sound advice, but like for me, I love taking a break from the project when I'm feeling like really like frustrated. I like taking a break and then coming back and like mapping out exactly what I would need to feel really good about this feature or this improvement or whatever I'm working on. And then you just tackle it, you know? And then it's like you're back up, like, and then just taking those moments at the top to like be like, all right, I did it. I can do this. So I don't know, just like May said, just acknowledging that you're on the ride of imposter syndrome for sure.
Love it, love it, love it. Okay, awesome stuff. Anyone in the audience have any questions that they want to raise their hands or drop in the chat? Oh, beautiful. Jamie, take it away.
So I'm curious, and I guess this is more of like, I don't want to say darker side of it all, but have you ever went into a company being told it was like diverse and inclusive or anything like that, and then found out once you're in that it was more so not really that inclusive, or it's just you got like that feeling that you really couldn't be yourself, I guess would be my question.
I'm trying to speak pretty vaguely here. This is not at my current company, which I think is really wonderful and great. I have had a prior experience where maybe certain people in the company were less inclusive than others in the company. While I would not say the entire company was not inclusive, there were experiences I had with certain individuals where it was like a problem. This was less on like an LGBT issue standpoint and more on maybe like a race or gender issues standpoint. It's really tough. I actually ended up leaving that position and kind of doing some other stuff for my own mental health. It's really hard to be in a company where you don't feel welcome and where people you're working with are maybe acting in ways, even if they're not bad people, they're just continually being insensitive to you. That's just a really challenging experience. And thankfully, that's not something I've experienced in my company currently at all. Like Twitch is amazing. And I would say that there's a couple ways to approach this. And I'm also coming at this from sort of a previous like ex-HR person perspective. You can approach the person individually and try to talk to them. I think this usually works best if you have some kind of rapport with them. Maybe they're a coworker or they're your manager and you feel you can raise the issue with them. You can also go to HR about it, although it depends on the company, it depends on the HR team, how effective like a complaint or any kind of discussion with them will be. Or you can, leave. That's also a possibility. You can try to find something better for yourself somewhere else. I also think that it can be hard to avoid these situations because companies can be a kind of a black box when you're interviewing. They can say a lot about their diversity and they may not follow up with it, or they may be great and then hire someone who is not so great later on after you've been working there for a while. That's always a possibility where like a new manager or someone new comes in and changes the dynamic within a company. So I would say that it's something to kind of expect, kind of like how you need to carry your umbrella around in case of rain. Like I wouldn't go into every company or every situation expecting to be microaggressed or expecting problems to occur, but I would always, prioritize yourself, prioritize your health, always be, learning things and upping your skills just for your own personal growth and also your career growth. But in the event that you do unfortunately end up in a, maybe negative situation, you can have an hour, you have those like career opportunities for you, so you can make sure to protect yourself against them if that ever does occur for you.
I know this is not about me, but a few companies ago, I was told I reported another employee's words and was told, "Oh, it's fine. He would not have said that if he knew you were gay." And I was like, "Oh, well, in that case, but don't worry, I don't work there anymore." So it happens, it happens. And I think if we keep our eyes and our ears open, watching a company deal with it, they obviously can't do anything if you don't tell the company about it. You can't be mad at the company for an employee's behavior. But watching their behavior closely, it has certainly helped me in a lot of situations. Corey, what's up?
Hello. So one of the questions that I have is, so I have one more week and then I'm going to begin my fellowship for Codesmith. But for that portion plus beyond, like what suggestions do you all have on not necessarily having to be a change maker within your workplace, but being able to advocate for other LGBTQ individuals?
Well, I think for me, again, I'm in this very like unusual, magical job where I'm surrounded by queer people, and we all sort of advocate for each other. So that is a little bit of an easy out to that question. But I think a way that that I feel like I'm advocating for the community is by actually working at this company and doing the work that we do, since it is so community driven and so mission driven. And our big focus is helping people who are marginalized be included in some really important life things like healthcare. So that to me is, I guess, how I do that in my current job.
I'd say for me, my current role, I would say like twofold. One, since I work at a really small crypto startup, there's 20, 25 people. And my CTO and other people in my company, like just having conversations like about inclusivity and how do we prioritize it? How can we, hire recruiters that can dip into a more diverse candidate pool and just like moving those conversations along, right? Just like bringing awareness to them. And then also, I think like alternatively, just like empowering ourselves to be the best we can, to be empathetic and kind and like stand in our power and fucking just like kill it, because then people around you in your community will be like, wow, she's a queer woman, like, and she is successful, like I can do that too. And just being a resource for people around you, I think sometimes like the best thing we can do for our community is like genuinely like self-empowerment. So I brought that up a lot just because I think that's a really huge point of advocacy sometimes, just being the best we can be and sharing that with our community and being there.
I love that. Kaylee?
Yeah, so I kind of have maybe like a strange or kind of personal response to this. I think advocacy work is really important and really wonderful, and I continue to do it at my job. One thing I would say is that, first of all, I think just existing as a queer person in a world that is essentially hostile to us is like advocacy in and of itself. So I actually don't think you need to actually do anything as a queer person at your job, and I don't feel anyone should feel obligated to do that. The fact that all of y'all are doing that is like so amazing and so great. And I also continue to do that myself. But I do think that sometimes when you are in a minority group, there is like a danger at your job that you start to do uncompensated diversity work. And I would just like caution people who are maybe starting out in their careers to like think about like whether or not. So for me, I often got pushed into this as a recruiter. And maybe this is just something that happened to me only and isn't something happening to the other panelists or anybody else here. But I would often be expected to do a lot of the diversity work because I would be the only person of color on a team, for example. So I would say like, do the advocacy work that speaks to you, that really fuels you, but also like make sure to protect yourself as well and make sure to protect your coding time, the time that you spend on your own technical work, and just the awesomeness that you are as a queer person, and not drain yourself trying to be all things to all people, or maybe doing advocacy that your company is expecting from you, but you aren't being compensated adequately for.
Oh my God, I love that. And it is so important to illuminate this entire mindset that the brown femme is supposed to be the one doing the work. So I thank you for bringing that up, Kaylee. It's really, really important. Okay, cool. Then let's end it with everyone's favorite. This is a real on the spot one, but you don't have to be anything that's groundbreaking with this one. What does pride mean to you? And how are you celebrating?
Yeah, what is pride to me? I think it's just like celebrating our likeness and our differences, and the beauty that lies between those. And what am I doing? Okay, so I live in a super small town, but we have like a tiny pride here, and there's like a very small pride parade, maybe like 30 people. So I'll be going to that, and there's like a few events at a bar, and yeah, just hanging with my crew here.
I love it. I love it. 30-person pride parade. May, how about you?
Yeah, so let's see, what is pride? Pride for me is like a safe space community to like let you can be yourself. And since this year, how I celebrate it is, so this year I'm currently in Thailand right now, and this year is the first year that Thailand has Pride Parade. So yeah, I celebrate with my LGBT friend here. Yeah.
Love it, May. Love it. Kaylee.
Yeah, so I'm like one of those people that actively avoids leaving the house. So I have been celebrating Pride by sending appropriate emojis to all my queer friends. I have been working really more internally this Pride. So I really want to really celebrate myself as like a queer, a bisexual, Asian, Jewish adoptee, and all the facets of that and what that means for me. And I've also been trying to re-engage with my artistic side with its queerness. So I'm giving a lecture on a queer composer, Samuel Barber, at my job and performing one of his vocal masterpieces. So I'm sharing opera with the world, which I really love. And I'm currently undergoing revisions on my queer novel. So let's pray that gets sold to a publishing house. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Not leaving the house.
That's it, Kaylee? That's all you're doing? Wow.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, well, I guess some of us celebrate smaller than others, right? Just a book and a lecture recital. Love it. Andrew.
I think pride to me, to steal a phrase that Julia has used a couple times this evening, is standing in your power. That really resonates with me, and I think that is a really important part of being a strong, authentic queer person. And to celebrate Pride, my entire company is volunteering at some of the Pride events that are happening in New York City. So we're doing that at the conference, which I think is on next Thursday. 2 Thursdays from now, I think.
Beautiful stuff. Well, y'all, thank you so much for your time. I hope everyone in the room takes a moment to consider what pride means to them.